Okay. Jules, you ready, Jules? Okay. We are on the bottom. Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. We're discussing different ways to acquire land. So we spoke about locking up a field, making a fence on a field, making a breach on a field. And the last thing we discussed yesterday was there are sometimes cases where you can remove a rock or put down a rock, and that itself could be an acquisition of the land. Sometimes not. When it's a rock that you're removing or putting down in order to save the person's field, it's going to come and flood the field. So just because you did something significant, but that we said, that's every Jew's obligation to save his friend's money. That's nothing unique to here. But if you put down a rock or took off a rock to irrigate the field, so there's a water system in the field, and you put down a rock there, and now the water is maintained in the field, and it'll cause some nice irrigation to the field. So that is doing a significant act because you're improving the field. If you do something to improve the field, that's enough to acquire the field. And that's going to be a big, something very important that we're going to see more on Nundal Amud Aleph. Doing something significant, some kind of improvement to the field is a way to acquire the field. Doing something insignificant or doing something which is just basic Judaism, saving someone else's money, we don't see that you are showing ownership of the field. So we are 2 lines from the bottom of 53a, Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. The Amar of Asi, Amar of Yochanan. Rav Asi said in the name of Rav Yochanan. So now we're going to talk about a bunch of cases. You have 2 fields that are next to each other. How can you acquire both of them by just acquiring one of them? Or let's say you're going to have 2 houses, or 2 big rooms, one outside the other room. One is the inside room, one is the outside room. Can you acquire one, and then by doing that acquire the other? So shtei sados, echad, shtei sados umeitzar echad beinehem. You have 2 fields, and there's a fence in between them. So now, hichzik ba'achas mehen, you went and you made a chazaka on one of the fields. In any way, shape, or form that you do a chazaka, you went to acquire that field. So hichzik ba'achas mehen, liknos okana. So you acquire that field, okay? Liknos osa ves chaverta. You went and you did an acquisition on one field, and you want to acquire both fields. It says the Gemara, oso kana chaverta lo kana. The one you did an acquisition on, you made a chazaka on, that one you've acquired. The other field, you didn't do anything to it. Therefore, you didn't acquire it. Likno says chaverta, af oso lo kana. Let's say I have field A and field B. I want to acquire field B. So by doing an acquisition on field A, I want to acquire field A and field B. So if I acquire field A, I only acquire field A. Let's say I want to do an acquisition on field A only to acquire field B. It's definitely not going to work. So that's all the Gemara says. Basically you have to do an acquisition on the field that you want to acquire. That's the rule. The Rashbam happens to point out here that we're talking about specifically ownerless property. Nichse Hagir, usually the property of a convert that died is known to inherit him. So it's ownerless land. And in that case, these rules apply. But let's say you made up with somebody a sale, right? And the guy says, I'll sell you 100 fields. And you say, okay, I'll make an acquisition on one of the fields, and then I acquire the other 99 of your fields. So if you make up with a buyer and a seller, so that's fine. It's just if you want those ownerless fields over there and you want to go acquire them, you have to show ownership on each field that you want to acquire. Yeah, okay. By Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera had an inquiry. He had a question. Hichzik ba'achas man liknos osa ve'es ha'meitzar ve'es chaverta. So I did a chazaka in one of the fields in order to acquire that field, the fence, you also want to acquire the fence, and you want to acquire the field next to it. So now, we just answered that question earlier. You have to do an acquisition on the field that you want to acquire. So the Rashbam explains that his question is really saying, earlier you couldn't acquire the other field because there was a fence there, differentiating between the two fields. So it's a clear distinction. I'm acquiring field A and not field B. But maybe, who says you can't acquire a fence with acquiring a field? Once you could acquire a fence with acquiring a field, so then maybe you could now also acquire the other field. So that's where his question is coming from. Here, you want to acquire the fence too. So if you want to acquire the fence, maybe that'll allow you to acquire the whole property, both fields together. So the Gemara says, Mir minan hayi meitzer. Oh, so what's the question? Mir minan hayi meitzer afser da'arahu bekani odil mahay lekudei kai v'hay lekudei kai teku. The Gemara says maybe the fence is like the reins of the field. Meaning, let's say you want to acquire 10 animals, right? Jews got excited, you went horseback riding, or no, you saw a lot of animals, you want to acquire 10 animals. So these 10 animals are all connected by a rein. They have one reins, one rope, basically tying them all together. At the end, I think they put into the animal's mouth, and you could steer them left or right. So you can acquire all 10 animals by acquiring the reins of the animals. You don't need to actually make a separate kinyan, a separate acquisition on each animal. If there's something connecting all the animals, then you could acquire all of them by holding the reins. Yeah. So we thought here that maybe a fence is similar to the reins of animals. Just like the reins of the animal protect the animals, so the fence also protects the fields. So that's the Gemara. So maybe it should be similar, or maybe not. The reins of the animal, they're attached to all the animals. You're holding the reins. It's much more. We see much more of an acquisition when you take the reins and you do an acquisition that you're acquiring all the animals. But we don't see that really by a fence. Maybe each field is on its own. We said we don't know. Teku. We don't know. Okay. Amar of Nachman, Amar al Baravua. Oh, so now what about two houses? So imagine like the Shnei Batim means two houses, but it could be also two very big rooms, very big living spaces. So you have one room, the outer room has the entranceway to the public thoroughfare, to the outside. The inner room is its own living quarters, but you can't get there except for going through the outside. So like any building, basically, right? Any building, you have a door over here in Kesser, right? So to get to the kitchen, the kitchen has a door over here, but the rabbi's office, let's say that was a living quarters. Yeah, put a mattress down and that's it. So to get to that, the rabbi's office, you have to go through the front door. So now let's say I want to acquire this building. So how does that work? Shnei batim, zelif nimizeh. Two houses. One is inside the other house, meaning one is the inner house, one is the outer house. Higzik bechitzon leknoso. Kano, if you want to make an acquisition on the outer house, it's yours. Liknos oso ve'es hapinimi. You want to acquire now the outer house and then the inner house. Hitzon kana, pinimi lo kana. So then the outer house you've acquired, but you cannot make an acquisition on the inner house by acquiring the outer house. It's not going to work. Just like the fields. Liknos es hapinimi. Let's say you make an acquisition, a chazaka, on the outer house to only acquire the inner house. So then, af chitzon nami lo kana. Then you've acquired nothing. You didn't have intent for the outer house, and you didn't do anything for the inner house. So 0 plus 0 is 0. Liknos es hapanimi, af chitzon nami lo kana. Okay. Higzik v'pnimi liknoso kana. You acquire the inner house and you do a chazak on it. Fantastic, it's yours. Liknos oso v'esachitzon. Here comes the novelty. You do an act on the inner house. Can that also acquire the outer house? Says the Gemara, Liknos oso v'esachitzon kana shnehem. Now here comes the novelty. You've acquired both. So you go to acquire the rabbi's office and you want to acquire the sanctuary. you've acquired the sanctuary too. Why? Where's the Rashban? You've acquired both, I think, because the only way to get to the outside is through the outer house. So you see that really the inner house is totally subservient to the outer house. It needs the outer house to get anywhere. So when someone does an acquisition on the inner house, you can't really live in the inner house alone. You have to be always going through the outer house. And therefore, since it's like tafel, it's subservient to it, you've acquired it. Yeah, is that what it says in the?
The outer portion of the outer apartment is subordinate to the inner.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, the outer house is subordinate to the inner house. So it's like and then funny example, but like
Okay, but most of the Rishonim dispute.
Right, they have different gears in the Gemara. Okay, but right, some Rishonim say it doesn't work that way, and they have to reread the Gemara and put in a different words. Okay, but according to these words and the Rashbam, it would work. Fine. Lignos, yeah, fine. Says, understand. Okay. Lignos as a chitzon, afa panimi lokan. If you go and try to acquire it, you make an acquisition on the inner house, only to acquire the outer house, then you've acquired nothing. Okay. So basically, the rule of thumb is the field or house, the room that you want to acquire, you have to do an acquisition on that room itself. There's one case which not all the Rishonim agree to. It's when you do an acquisition on the inner room, which is subordinate to the outer room, do you acquire the outer room too? So according to the Rashbam, you would acquire it. And according to other Rishonim, you would not acquire it, and then they have to have a different girsa, a different version of the Gemara to make it fit with the words. Okay, continuing the conversation on how to acquire property. Amar of Nachman, Amar of Baravua. Habona Palterin Gedolim Benichse Hager. You go and you build a big mansion, and once again, ownerless property. Nichse Hager is just a way to refer to ownerless property. Uba Acher Vehemi Lehen Lasois. Someone else comes and installs doors. So you build a gorgeous mansion, only one problem. You can't get in. There's no doors. Then a guy comes, and this guy's a very smart guy, by the way. You do all the work. He sees you building for 3 years. The guy comes when you're on vacation for a week. He goes and installs doors. Kana, second guy acquires the mansion. Because even though you think you built a beautiful mansion, nothing significant has happened because no one can go in or out. Once you've built doors, so now you've done something very significant, and you have acquired that mansion. My taima. So what's the reason that the first guy doesn't acquire it? Kama livni be'almahud apich. He was just organizing bricks. He organized them so nicely that it became a mansion, but it's totally not usable. Yeah. Amar of Dibi Bar Yosef, Amar of Elazar, Hamotzi Paltrin Benichse Hager. You found a mansion. All of a sudden, you heard that there's an ownerless mansion somewhere. So you run over, you drive over. Now, can you acquire it in different ways? For example, Visad Behen Siyud Echad, O Kiyur Echad. So this is an interesting way to acquire stuff. You plaster some lime, or you draw or engrave a nice picture on it. It's interesting. Kanan, yeah, Kanan, you've also acquired it through lime or through picture. You have also acquired it. So one sec, how much do you have to lime? How big does the picture have to be? A stick figure or a large portrait. So the kama Amar of Yosef one amma is enough. That's significant enough already that you've done something which improves the house. I guess lime I guess is improvement to the house. It helps with the bricks, maybe the lime, and then drawing a picture, that's also an improvement. It decorates the house, at least according to your artistic skills. So Rabbi Yosef has to be an amma though. Amar of Chisda, but where are you going to put it? Ukineged a Pesach. Has to be right in the front of the house, right near the entrance of the house. That's where it's most visible, and that's where it has most significance. you do a little Amma painting in the back of the house. So that's very little significance, if any. But here, someone's going to walk by a house. Sometimes you walk by a certain property, a big mansion somewhere or something, and like the beautiful decoration outside, it captures your eye. So a similar idea over here. The idea is that continuing our discussion of improving, we have to improve the land. Even a nice picture is an improvement, but it has to be where it's most visible. Okay. Amar of Amram. Rav Amram said, Hayi Milsa, Amram Rav Sheshas. Rav Sheshas told us a certain halacha, Van Hiru Einin Mimas Nisa. And he literally enlightened our eyes from a brisa. He said something, and then he brought a brisa which supports it. Which the reason why that enlightens your eyes is because people can say many things. But once you bring a Tanaic source for that, so then you see that there's a much more of a validity to it. If there's more validity to it, so then we'll know it's true. So what did he teach us, and what price did he bring? Hamotzi matzos b'nechseger. What if you go and you spread mattresses down on ownerless property? You want to go to sleep tonight, so you put down a mattress for you to sleep on. Says the Gemara, kana. That's also a way to acquire them. Yeah. So the Rishbamir says you put down the mattresses and you lie down on them. And he said, and even though it's not like one of our famous, you didn't make a lock or a fence or a breach, meaning how did you improve the land? Until now, you have to do something that's improving the land. A fence, a breach, irrigation system, even art, even some lime. So what do you do here? Ella, the Ramban, the Rashbam says, Ella, shenene gufa min akarka. However, your body was nana from the karka. You put down, you had somewhere to put down your mattress to sleep now. So apparently that is also enough to acquire land. Why? You used the land. Since you used the land, your body got real benefit from the land. That's enough. Yeah. Okay. So that was the novelty that Rav Sheshes told Rav Amram, and he's going to bring a very interesting proof for this. What's the proof for this? The anhiru einan mimasnisa maihi. What's this enlightening our eyes from a brisa? The Tanya, it says in the brisa, ketzad bechazaka, right? So the brisa in Kedushin talks about you want to acquire a servant, an eved. How do you acquire an eved? So there's many ways to acquire him. Let's see the cases. Ketzad bechazaka. How do you make a chazaka on eved? So yeah, so the Rishbam says that we're talking specifically about a Canaanite servant. Eved Ivri, a totally Jewish servant, will have different rules. So basically, a lot of cases where the servant's going to be somehow servicing the master. Na'olo, if he Na'olo, he brings him his shoes.
Puts your shoes on.
And then and then Na'olo, and that's what's Minalo? He takes them off. Okay, Na'olo or Minalo. So either he puts on the shoes or he takes off the shoes. Oh, Hitilo Minalo, or maybe he unties the shoes for him. No, sorry, Na'olo Minalo. Oh, Hitilo Minalo, right? Either he puts on a shoe or he takes off the shoe. Oh, Shaholik Kelev Akrab. The guy's a lot of, there's a whole backpack full of stuff, and the servant goes and carries the backpack for him. The Beis HaMerchatz to the wash house. The Hifshitu, he takes off his clothing. Hirchitzu, he washes him. Sicho, he smears him with oil. Gardo. What's gardo?
Scrape your skin.
He scrape his skin, okay. Vehilbisho, or he clothes him. The Anilo, what this again, putting on shoes?
Yeah.
Why did I say shoes on twice? Okay, I don't know. This is all part of the wash house process. I don't know. And now it says what we need, the higbio. Somebody picked up somebody. Okay, we're going to see in a second. Kano, he's acquired. So either the master picked up the servant, or the servant picked up the master. Reb Shimon lo tei chazaka gedola mehagba. Cryptic statement. We'll see in a second. Reb Shimon said that chazaka shouldn't be the way to acquire with a chazaka shouldn't be greater than hagba. Why? Shehagba kona b'chol makom. We know in general by movables you can do mashicha, you can pull them to acquire them. However, hagba is so novel that when you lift up someone's movables, like your coffee mug, I can even do it in your possession. Right? I can go to your property and lift up your coffee mug. Other acquisitions, you can't do that. You have to pull it into your property. So if I want to pull your coffee mug, I need to pull it to me. If I want to lift it up, lifting can acquire even in the domain of the seller. So you see that hagba is the most, is the greatest form of acquiring. Yeah. So now, who's picking up who, and what was Rav Shimon saying? My kamar haki kamar, hikbio lerabo kana. If he picks up the master, then the master has acquired him. Hikbia rabo lo. If the master picks up the servant, lo kano, he has not acquired him. The servant has to. Yeah, it is interesting. The servant has to pick up the master, then he's acquired him. The master picks him up, he has not acquired him. On that, Rabbi Shimon argues and says, no. Lo tei chazaka gedola mehagba. Shagba kona b'chol makom. Hagba is kona even in the property of somebody else. So even here, when you're picking him up, that's like, in his domain, that should acquire. So now what's that have to do with anything? So what did we see though? The Tanna Kama said that if the master picks up the Rabbo, he's acquired him. So the Gemara wants to equate this to our case of the mattresses. Why? Both cases, either the master or the one who wants to acquire the property is leaning on, his weight is leaning on either the mattress on the ground or on the Eved. So you see that here he's using the Eved for his strength, right? The Eved's carrying him. So he's relying on him. He's leaning on him, right? Or in the same, so too, when you're trying to acquire the property of this ownerless property, when you're using the land by laying down a mattress and lying down on it, that's also considered. That's also going to be an acquisition. So basically, we brought this whole thing of how to acquire an Eved just to show us that it's a valid form of acquisition when your body weight, you're leaning on the Eved, that's enough to acquire for you to acquire him. So too, when you use the land and you lean on the land, that's also a valid form of acquisition. Yeah. And Rav Shimon argues, and Rav Shimon says no. That you can even pick up the Eved, and that should be enough. Okay. Now it's a little bit like a new discussion, different ways to acquire fields, and then just a lot of statements of Shmuel. Amar of Yirmiyah Bira, Amar of Yehuda. Going on to 54a. Haiman de Shada Lifta, Ve'pili de Ara de Ger, Lo Havi Chazaka. I think the case is here you're throwing a turnip, right? A turnip, yeah. You're throwing it. What are you saying? Right, into a crack. And now basically you want it to grow. So you just threw it in. Now usually you got to soften the land first to make it easier. But you didn't do that over here. You just threw it into a crack. And guess what happens? It started to grow. Says the Gemara, no. That doesn't count as an acquisition. Why? My time up in the Shada Lohave Shivcha. When you threw it, there's no improvement to this property. Now, 5 months later, it started to grow. So that improvement, the kashavach, that's memela kashavach. That happened on its own. That wasn't you. You have to do something that right now improves the property. Just throwing something to a crack and then 5 months later it starts growing. So that improvement happened on its own. You started the process, but you're not directly causing the improvement. It has to be right away. So when you soften the ground, so then, when you soften the ground for growth and then you plant something, okay, that's already improvement. But just throwing something to a crack, that's not going to be that's not going to be an improvement. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Omar Shmuel. Haiman. Yeah. Haiman de Pashak Dikla. So adai to the Dikla Kani, adai to the Chiyusa Lo Kani. So you go and you're removing the branches from the tree. I guess there's date palms on it. So now it depends. So is that a valid form of acquisition? So it depends why you're doing it. If you're doing it for the tree, then you've acquired the tree. If you're doing it for your animals, so then you have no intention to improve this tree. Since you have no intention to improve the tree, that's not a valid form of acquiring something. Now, I'm just wondering, how does removing branches improve the tree?
Branches, clip them off, and new growth.
That's an example. Branches that are dying, like cutting them off, the new ones will grow. So you took off this branch and maybe it has some fruit on it or something. So if you took it off for your animal, so you have no intention of the tree getting any better. But if you took it off for the tree, then you want to improve the tree. So that's so that's going to be good. So here,
because palm trees, the branches actually die.
right. So here's the
the palm trees. The branches they just
swoop down. So here the Rashbam says an important thing. He says to acquire you need two things. Tarti ba'ina. One is shiyasa tikun bekarka biyadayim. You have to do an improvement to the land with your hand, meaning direct improvement, and you have to make sure that in that improvement you have intent to improve it, right? So that's sort of the rule of thumb, with some exceptions, like a match on the ground. But except for that case, really, you have to intend and directly improve the land. So now, the question is, how do you discern two guys are taking off a branch of a date palm tree? So now they start claiming, it's mine. How do you know if they've taken off a branch for the animals, and how do you know if they took it off for the tree? Says the Gemara, Heichidami. So shakal mahayagisa umahayagisa, adapted the dikla. If you take off branches from both sides of the tree, then it shows that you want the tree to get better. If you only taking off from one side of the tree, mechad gisa, kula mechad gisa, so then adaita de chiyusa. Apparently, the Rashbam explains when you only take off from one side, it's mekalkel huas ilan. That you're only doing it from one side. So since that's actually causing damage to the tree, so then that's for sure you're just doing it because you want to give it to your animals. Interesting. I'm just thinking now, so like, what if you do something which is not damaging the tree, right? So in this case, he says, when you only take from one side of a tree, that's damaging the tree, then we know for sure you are doing it for your animals. If you do it from both sides of the tree, you for sure want the tree to grow. I guess there's no middle ground, right? There's nothing in the middle.
Want it to be symmetrical.
Is there any gray area?
It's always, anyway, you always want it to
You don't take enough from one side to actually destroy the tree. I don't know. I'm asking, what do you need? It sounds like you need to, I guess every time you take off a branch, there's some improvement to the tree, except when you take off only from one side. That's going to damage the tree. Maybe it's uneven, I guess. It's,
Well, maybe it's the intent. Just take it one side, it's easier. Yeah.
Right, that's
probably got more to do with the characteristics of the palm tree.
What?
I said it's probably got more to do with the characteristics of the palm tree.
right. It's interesting. I'm sure your footnote says it too, but the Rashbam says that taking off branches only from one side of a tree is destructive to the tree.
Right. Yeah, that's
So if you imagine someone doing something destructive to a tree, you obviously know he's not trying to acquire the tree. What he's trying to do, take and feed to his animals. I'm just wondering if there's any gray area. Can you do something which is, I guess there's no gray area. You're really, every time you take off a branch off a tree, you're improving it, unless you're only taking off from one side. Okay, fine. First statement of Shmuel of many. Next statement of Shmuel. Amar Shmuel. One of your underlining cards are good. Get one of your underlining cards. They're good. Yeah. Amar Shmuel. Amar Shmuel. Hayman de Zachi Zichya. Adaita de Arakani. Adaita de Tzivi. Lo Kani. You go and you're sweeping up the land. You're smoothing it out. You're cleaning it from its thorns and the bad grass. Maybe the grass turned yellow. Maybe the grass is old. So you're cleaning it up. So now, if you're cleaning up the field because you want to then plow there, and you want to grow something there, then you're doing that for the field. So then that you acquire it. However, if you're just doing it adaita de tzibi because you want to gather up wood to who knows, for your bonfire, so then it's Lag Bomer's coming up soon. The Israeli kids are preparing for Lag Bomer 6 months in advance with all their wood to build for the bonfire. So then you have not acquired the field. So same question. Hey Chidami, how do you know? You see a guy sweeping up thorns and grass from a field. How do you know if he's doing it for the field? And how do you know if he's doing it for just to collect the wood? So hey Chidami. So Shakal Rafrive Vizutre. You see the guy, he's taking not only big pieces of wood and thorn off the field, he's even taking little pieces of wood and thorn off the field. So those little pieces not going to help him for his bonfire, but it's going to help make his field nice. So then adaita de ara shakal. Adaita de ara shakal ravirei v'shavik zutre adaita de tzivi. If you're only taking the big long pieces of wood and you're not taking small pieces, then you want the big piece of wood for your bonfire, and you don't care about the ground. So in that case, you have not acquired the ground. Because once again, we see, right, often intent is shown in the form of action, right? So you can intend from today until tomorrow, but show me what you mean. So when we see you collecting all the wood, we know that you intend to make the field nice, as opposed to big pieces of wood where you intend to only use it for your barbecue. Another third statement of Shmuel, Amar Shmuel. Yeah, so Amar Shmuel. Man de iskil tikla. So one who removes mecholos, I don't know how to translate it, things that are like preventing you from growing the field, not just thorns, but things that make it uneven. What is that? Obstacles.
Yeah, obstacles, yeah.
Obstacles. So basically, when you mow the lawn. So I learned the hard way, but you got to remove the baseballs from the lawn before you mow it, because it could hurt the baseball. Also lawn mower. So the golf ball, right? Exactly. So this guy's removing all the obstacles from his land. So now, if he does it for the land, you've acquired the land. If he does it adaita de dari lo kani. Adaita de dari. What's that de dari?
For creating a temporary threshing floor.
Guess by what? By removing the obstacles, you're going to create a temporary threshing floor.
Mm-hmm. So when someone's just on the space where you're going
to
level the ground.
So either you're removing the obstacles because you want the ground to be nice, or you just want a little threshing floor. So I guess pile up all your produce.
You didn't want to build the new.
Correct. So how do you know which one's which? So Echidami. So Shakal Mulya Shada Binsa Adaita de Ara. Mulya b'mulya v'natza b'natza. So then Adaita debei dari. So he goes and he's removing. 1 second. Right. So Shakal Mulya is what? He's removing the little heaps.
Right. Yeah. Putting them in the holes.
So what? He's removing the heaps. He's taking all the dirt and putting it into the holes. Right. The Shada Benatza, then he wants to do it for the land. However, Mulya b'mulya v'natza b'natza, what? Meaning what? He doesn't take the dirt and pile it and put it into the holes. He makes a heap out of it. Right? Is that it?
Exactly. So just kind of rake it up.
Semi-level, just moves the dirt around a little bit. It fills the holes and stuff.
If you take the dirt from a heap and you put it into a hole, then you know you want the land. You want the land. But if you just take the heap and flatten out the heap, so then you know you just want it to be a threshing floor. Got it. Okay. Okay. Fourth statement of Shmuel. V'amar Shmuel, Hayman. Time is it? Okay, 2 minutes. Okay. V'amar Shmuel, Hayman the pasuk Maya ba'ara. If you open up water for the land, adai to the ara kani. If you do it for the field, you've acquired the field. Adai to the kvari loy kani. If you do it for the fish, lo kani. Sometimes you want to let water in. Hopefully, fish will come swimming in from the river. Right now in Portland, here they have all the salmon here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Steve attaches, some kind of irrigation system from where the salmon are to his backyard. So it could be he just wants salmon. So let's see. So hey chidami. So pasach trei bavi. You open up 2 channels of water. Chad ma'ayil, chad mafik. You want water to come in, and then there's a way to go back out. So then adapt to the kvari. Then you're just doing it for the fish. Fish will come in. You'll take the fish, and then guess whatever fish you don't want, they can go back out. And chad bava adapt to ara. But if you only open up 1 channel of water, then you know you're just doing it for the land. Right. Because if you want to irrigate your field, so then you could just open up 1 channel of water. Water will come in, and the water will stay there, and then that'll irrigate your field. But if you create 2 openings, so then it sounds like you don't really want the water to stay and irrigate your field. You just want fish to come through, right? So in that case, then you have not acquired the field. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The Rishbam says, listen, if you really wanted to water your field, you just open up 1 opening. And you can get both. You make 1 opening from the river to your field. So what's going to happen? You're going to irrigate your field. Also, you can also catch fish there. And the fish will come through. Why are you making 2 openings for the field? It's not going to maintain the water in your field and irrigate it. It must be that you don't want to acquire the field. Okay. So after 4 statements of Shmuel, we're going to have a nice story. I mean, not so nice for the woman in the story, but there's a lady who was eating, date palms from this palm tree. She was eating from this palm tree by taking off the branches, like we said earlier, right? We said earlier that taking out branches from a date palm tree is 1 way to acquire the tree. So she was doing this for 13 years. Now what happens? Asu ha'u gavra and rapik tute purta. He dug a little under the tree by the roots of the tree to help the roots. And now basically he wanted that to be a form of acquisition. So also lakame de Levi, he went in front of Levi. V'amri la kamei de marukva. Some say he went in front of marukva. Okay, what happened? They said, Rabbi Yid, congratulations, you've acquired this date palm tree. He said, Ukme biyade, they put the tree in his possession. What you did, this little digging by the roots to help the roots, was a form of acquisition. So guess who came screaming her head off? This lady who's been eating off this tree for 13 years. So aside got tzafsa kamei, she comes in screaming. Amarla, my avidlach, delo achzikas kedemaxi inchi. They said you were eating off this palm branch tree, but you didn't use it, acquire it the way people normally acquire date palm trees, which is what you kept eating from only 1 side. If you would have taken off branches from both sides of the tree, that's the normal way people go about acquiring a date palm tree. But you only took from 1 side of the tree, just because you did it for so many years, more than a decade. But but that's not enough. Versus this guy that comes, he made 1 little hole, he dug a little bit right by the roots of the tree, but doing something by the roots of the tree improves the roots. Once you've improved the roots, so then that's already enough to acquire the land. Amarav hatzar tsura b'nichseger. You go and you draw a nice picture in the property an ownerless property, but it's here. Kana. So now, oh yeah, so you go to the house basically, and you draw a nice picture, like we saw earlier. Now, what's the difference between we said earlier engraving? Now it's drawing. Right, that's interesting. The Rashbam is bothered by that. Earlier we said if you put on line or a picture, you have to make sure it's one amma by the entrance. Yet here, as long as you draw a picture of an animal, right? So then you don't need any of that. Why? He says that's already such a significant act you did. So then you don't need an amma, and you don't even need it right by the front. If you're just going to draw something else that's more insignificant, then you'd have to put it by the front. Yeah, so Amar Rav Atar Tzor said Yerkana, and Rav himself, interestingly enough, Rav himself, the Rav Loikani, the Ganze de Be Rav Ela B'Tzra. So there's some kind of a garden for the people for the Academy of Rav. You know, it sounds like the yeshiva backyard or something like that. How did Rav go? It was ownerless, and they needed a new backyard, or he knew one for himself. How did he acquire it? He actually acquired it by drawing something significant on the walls of the house. Good, you got to 2 dots.
Now we understand why we have all these taggers around here, right?
That's right. That's right. Charles, you can't go on Zoom if I already saw you in the building. You know, you're playing.
No kidding. I'm not in the building yet.